It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
The biggest challenge I've had in my career, being with my own business, is actually getting past the banks more than anything, because they see obviously people that are self-employed as high risk. So my goal will be to self-fund the next property as much as I can and to take out a low bank loan as possible.
And that is Monique on the Gold Coast this morning. One of the places to be without a doubt during winter. Such a mild temperature, and I can vouch for that. And welcome back to the Real Estate Breakfast, right around Australia 7 days a week. Talking about your property news, your trends in cities like Hobart, Darwin, Sydney, Melbourne, also Perth. You can stream us, of course, on your favourite streaming platform. Now, a few days ago, Domain told us that the Melbourne property market is showing signs of a strong rebound, with suburbs offering large family homes and access to future infrastructure projects leading this rebound, this charge. Melbourne's median house price rose 1.6% to nearly 1.065 million over the past year, with a quarterly growth hitting its sharpest pace in 3.5 years. Yes, because it's been, as we know, a mixed bag for Melbourne over the past 18 months. Aberfeldie, that topped the list, incidentally, with a 21.6% surge to 1.94 million, followed closely by Fairfield and Heidelberg. Well, let's go to the Gold Coast right now and catch up with Monique Jeremiah. And a very good morning to you, Monique. Welcome to the Real Estate Breakfast. As I said, yes, there's a lot worse places to be than the Gold Coast when it comes to winter.
I agree. Actually, but it is cold, and I'm on my way back to Melbourne in a few hours' time. Gold Coast is a beautiful place to live.
Yes, without a doubt. Now, tell us a little bit about your property journey, because you got into property relatively young. You bought your first property at 21. So tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So I've always been very ambitious. And, when I was in university, I made the decision that, yes, as soon as I escape the education system, I'll be buying my first property. So I worked very hard, had 3 jobs, and bought a 3-bedroom townhouse on the Gold Coast. With a loan, I purchased it on my own and without the help of mum and dad, the bank. So, yes, I got in there and I lived in that property at the time. And then a few years later, I sold that property and I purchased another property, I think it was a 4-bedroom house in the Gold Coast. And again, I purchased that on my own without the help of anyone else, except for a mortgage. And then I actually renovated that property into an 8-bedroom property. And I used it for, obviously, my business purposes. Now I am turning 39 in a few months' time. And my goal is to get into the Melbourne market, because I think Melbourne is a good opportunity and I think it's good value for money. That's my goal right now, to get in as quick as I can while I can.
Gee, lots of commitment. Now, I want you to make everybody cry into their cornies this morning having breakfast, because I want to go back to that first property when you were 21. I know this firsthand because the Gold Coast market was such a different market. The amount of units that were available and extremely cheap. So let's all sort of go back in time and make everybody cry, because the price was, when you bought that property in the Gold Coast,
it was around, I think it was 220,000 from the top of my mind. And it was a 3-bedroom townhouse and in a lock-up sort of area. So yeah, it was great. It was great value. But, back then people thought that was expensive. But, a few years later, it doubled in price. So it was good to get in the market. And right now it is very hard, especially for first home buyers, to get in the market in the Gold Coast, because the prices have become astronomical. And a lot of people have flocked to the Gold Coast after COVID because they thought that's the best strategy for their families.
Yes, indeed. Well, the Gold Coast, as we know, as you've just said, has accelerated in pricing, particularly over the last 4 years. But Melbourne, compared to Queensland, still more expensive. The median house price on the Gold Coast is hovering around that $1 million mark, and you're looking at paying more. So where in Melbourne are you hoping to buy?
Ideally, I'm looking to be as close as I can to the city because I am a city slicker. So it would be North Melbourne, South Melbourne, Fitzroy, Carlton, Richmond, and maybe even Docklands. Just somewhere where there's good public transport, it's close to the shops. And also because the other reason why I'd like to purchase in Melbourne is I'm looking at a multi-purpose sort of property where I can run my company and also work from and stay there when I'm in town. So obviously, because I come from an entrepreneurial background, I'm looking at how can I maximise on the use of that property for both residential and commercial purposes.
Yeah, so if you have a look at something like Docklands, I would imagine there are sort of rules and regulations, are there, in terms of buying a unit in that particular part of town?
I've been tipped off that North Melbourne is a little bit easier to pull off what I'm trying to pull off. But, I run a national modelling agency, Diversity Models. And so I'm looking at obviously the long-term vision of how can I operate as cost efficiently as possible, but also have a base in Melbourne where I can travel to stay and actually potentially start a family there as soon as I can.
I note that you're talking about wanting to be as close to the CBD in Melbourne as possible because you don't have a car in Melbourne. Is that right?
That's correct. But I actually don't mind that because I've noticed from my trips of coming in and out of Melbourne, every 2 weeks or so, that the transport system is excellent down there. So you have the trains, the trams, there's Ubers. It's very convenient. So I don't really see the purpose of actually purchasing a car unless I really need one.
Let me tell you that Aberfeldie has surged ahead as Melbourne's top performing suburb with its riverside location, period homes and family appeal, making it highly sought after. With only a couple of thousand homes available there, demand far outweighs supply at the moment. I don't think we've ever talked about Aberfeldie. Entry level there for knockdowns are fetching around 1.5 million, highlighting the suburb's skyrocketing land value and its reputation as a quieter alternative. Is that an area that you've considered, or is that too far out for you?
Well, actually, you've just put it into my mind. So I will be looking into that suburb probably after this interview. Ideally, I'm still quite locked to the city areas, particularly because of the convenience level and because I love the metropolitan lifestyle as well. So when I'm not working, you'll see me in the city out shopping and enjoying, the culture, the food and everything that Melbourne has to offer.
What is one of the hardest things at the moment for you looking to get into the Melbourne property market? I mean, for somebody that has the experience of owning property, you've built up, by the sound of it, quite a bit of equity in your transactions over the last few properties. But still, transacting is transacting. It doesn't just automatically happen easily for people when they're looking at buying.
Oh, exactly right. I think the biggest challenge I've had in my career, being with my own business, is actually getting past the banks more than anything, because they see obviously people that are self-employed as high risk. So my goal will be to self-fund the next property as much as I can and to take out a low bank loan as possible so that I can get in the market. So that means I've got to be smarter in business first before I make a property purchase. My eyes are definitely on purchasing in Melbourne because I love Melbourne. I always have. And I was actually living in Melbourne 30 years ago before I moved to the Gold Coast.
Last week we were talking to Justin. Now, he's a guy that is self-employed, got $300,000 in the bank, tried to buy a $700,000 property. What is that, about 40% down? Can't get a loan from the bank. They've just tightened it a little bit too much for him. How much do you reckon being self-employed is a bit of a negative these days? Is that something you've got experience with?
To me, being self-employed means you have a greater freedom and a better lifestyle and you don't have a boss breathing over your shoulder. But the downside is that, yes, the banks do not see you as someone that can service a loan, even though you can. You can definitely service a loan if you are strong in business. I look at the positive outcome and I believe that, yes, if you want something to happen, you can make it happen. And that's, exactly what I did in the past with my previous purchases. But I just realized at this time, because obviously the property, as the prices are going up, I need to achieve as much as I can. And probably I'm aiming for maybe 70 to 80% of the purchasing price and then just leave that remainder for the bank if I can. If I can purchase it outright, that would be ideal. that would be the dream, because I have no intention of going back to employment ever again. I did my time in the corporate world for 1 year of my life, and that was a death sentence for someone that's entrepreneurial. So I'm definitely staying self-employed, and my target is to achieve that third property.
If you were somebody that was doing modelling when you were younger, and maybe you're in your 40s, maybe you're in your 50s, Monique, you sort of work with mature models. I love that word, mature models. But, there's a market for all sorts of different modelling, isn't there, these days?
Oh, absolutely. Like my company, Diversity Models, we specialise in 3 particular types of models. So people with disabilities is actually our biggest part of our business. So we're actually the first modelling agency in Australia that was started and focused specifically on disabilities. And then our second market, as you said, is mature age models. So we love to recruit those silver foxes because, they because they fit in their own market, in the over 50s sort of age group. And then our third market is multicultural models. But those 3 targets are niche models. Obviously, Melbourne is a great area for us to focus on because there is a concentration, and disabilities is growing too. So again, another, consideration for my future property is to make sure that it's disability friendly and it's in a location that's easy for people with disabilities to access as well.
You say mature, but come on, let's get real. A woman who is 50 years of age with all the fillers, all the Botox, they can look, 30. It's hard to pick.
Well, exactly. But, Craig, I actually have a policy in my agency, and we try not to hire people with Botox and fillers because I strongly believe that, confidence and natural beauty should come from within. And myself, I'm almost 40, I'm pushing 40, and I have not touched any of these injections or modifications, and I make that part of our agency culture. So I'm a strong believer in natural beauty and aging gracefully and naturally.
Do you have anybody, though, that's left if you've got that policy? Everybody's doing it.
Well, you know what? If you're talking about the Gold Coast, it's probably about 10% of the population here that do not have Botox and anything else. But I'm happy to be patient and find those gold models that are beautiful, as they are. And I think, Melbourne, obviously there's less of the Botox and plastic surgery culture there. So I think it's a greater market for me to find those very handsome and naturally beautiful mature age models who we would love to book for our clients.
All right, fantastic stuff, Monique. Well, good luck with your move there into Melbourne. I hope that you can find the right property that ticks all of the boxes, disability, etc. And thanks so much for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning and breaking down a little bit about your property journey.
Thank you so much, Craig. I really appreciate it.
Eager to expand your property expertise? Enhance your real estate know-how with us.
Look, if we went back a couple of years when the block did a regional location, which was a mixture of new and relocated homes, yes, they're going to have their challenges of, having to be off-site. They're going to be under a lot more pressure, but they're starting from the ground up with a new build.
Just give us a little bit of a breakdown on Daylesford for people around the country that don't know too much about it. In fact, they might know nothing about it. Maybe some of the demographics. We know what the median price is. I'm guessing that there's not too many units there?
No, there's not too many units. That's correct, Craig. So look, Daylesford, if you don't know anything about it, we don't have any huge fast food places as well. You will not find any of the big brands here, which we love. What you will get is artisan bakers and restaurants and wines and deli, and the food and wine collections that you can get in this region are truly outstanding, and that's what brings people back.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.